Z protests cabinet. After those anti-tax protests, the president had to reshuffle his cabinet. John Mbadi being one of those new members elected. So this was his first budget speech. And what was the reaction there in terms of, especially the young people?
Yeah, you see, the Treasury CS, John Mbadi, before being appointed the Treasury CS, of course, he was in the opposition, and during the Gen Z demonstrations, he was, all over social media. He was all over in campaign rallies, trying to say that this finance bill is now infringing on the rights of Kenyan, the taxpayers. And the young people. Now comes a time where he's now the man on the spotlight, because reading the 2025-2026 annual budget, for us, we feel that the things that he was against during last year's the finance bill. These are now the things that it is now being presented in this bill, and people feel that when people are outside government, they will speak bad things about government, but when they are inside the government, they now speak and dance to the tune of the government. Of course, these has also elicited quite some outrage all over the country, because there are some very critical clauses in the bill that might also be a burden to the taxpayers, and of course the Gen Z, of course, are planning for an anniversary in the coming week on the same, to commemorate and light candle for the young people who died during the last year's finance bill demos.
Let's move to Tanzania now, where a similar situation is happening, and the United Nations has called on Tanzania to curb the use of force against human rights activists. There's a growing pattern of repression and violence against opposition there. What's the latest been?
Yes, the UN human rights experts, they're now mounting pressure on the Tanzanian authority to ensure that there is the end to enforced disappearance. And you see, this comes at a time when two most activists from Kenya and Uganda were forcefully arrested, detained, and deported back to their countries. And you see, Tanzania is facing a growing international condemnation, because how the abductees are being treated. And remember, in October 2024, opposition leader Aisha Machano was abducted and later released with injuries. And according to her statement, the abductors identifies themselves as police, and people are wondering, are police supposed to inflict injuries on the abductees? And remember, in April 2025, we've seen the main opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, who is now the chairman of the opposition party, Chadema, was arbitrarily arrested for posting some conflicting information about the upcoming election. And Human Rights Watch have also highlighted the arbitrary arrest and harassment, especially
over
in the cities of
that, human rights groups coming into this. Tanzania is a party of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. This was adopted by the UN General Assembly. This convention prohibits enforced disappearance under any circumstance. So on this front, what can be done against Tanzania on accountability or even punishment?
Yes, you mentioned that Tanzania is part of the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, and going against these, that means that Tanzania is now defying the practices of the arrest and detention and abduction. So basically, there must be calls to the Tanzanian authority to ensure that this now comes to an end. Remember, Article 24 of the Convention obliges states to ensure justice and reparation of the victims. And of course, this now also access to legal and psychosocial, social and medical support. We've seen these is now the contrary. We saw what happened to Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atoure, who are now they were forcefully arrested. They were beaten. They didn't even get the medical support and also the psychosocial aspect of it. And now this is now contrary to the International Convention of the protection of all persons from enforced disappearances.
Right. Let's hope that we will be able to at least get some information, because that's something that the Tanzanian government is not forthcoming with, and see how far human rights groups can continue on this, as well as more activism. We leave it there for today, Dennis. Thanks again for your time, and thanks to your colleague.
Thank you so much, and have a good morning.
Thank you. That's Dennis Beirut, journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya, giving us zooming into what's making headlines in East Africa. It's 6:30 Central African time. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi. She's got our headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has signed legislation that allows military tribunals to try civilians. This is a move opposition leaders said violates a Supreme Court ruling. It appears that the family of the former late Zambian President Edgar Lungu and the current administration led by President Hakainde Hichilema have reached an agreement about his funeral. And Iranian state media has reported fresh explosions in Tehran in the early hours of this morning. This follows warnings from Israel for residents of the northeastern part of the city to evacuate. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Hey there, this is Balisa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you on the move right here on Channel Africa from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Africa time. Well, it's with your help for the past 2 years that we have been a multi-award winning show.
Finally, here we're keeping it on the move in 2025. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama, and we're going to keep you going with the great conversations. Turn it up.
Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Hey, it's time for our first full sports update. Here is Musabudi Makura. Good morning to you.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Very good morning from the Sports Desk. We'll start with this story that broke overnight. So in a development that marks the end of an era for South African women's football, Banyana star Jermaine Siposwene has announced her shock retirement from international football. The 31-year-old is currently plying her trade in Mexico for CF Monterrey Female after joining the club in June of 2023. On the international stage, the talented striker has been an integral part of Banyana with her ability to score as well as create goals. Siposwene's decision to retire comes as a surprise, especially with Banyana gearing up for the 2025 WAFCON tournament in Morocco next month. She was a key member of the squad that secured South Africa's historic first ever WAFCON trophy back in 2022, defeating the host nation Morocco in that final. The talented forward confirmed she will hang up her boots after the upcoming continental tournament, citing her well-being as a primary reason for this unexpected decision. Siopusweni expressed her gratitude to everyone who contributed to her journey and also acknowledging that her time has come to an end. She also emphasized passing the torch to the next generation, urging them to continue breaking boundaries and also fighting for change, setting an example and, most importantly, bringing immense joy to the people of South Africa. Onto this now. Kenya's Harambee Stars head coach Benny McCarthy has exuded confidence that his team will be ready to compete at the African Nations Championship Chan tournament in August. This after winning his first match in charge of Kenya's national team after 4 attempts. Harambee Stars played back-to-back international friendly matches against Chad in the recent FIFA international break, managing a goalless draw in the first and then a 2-1 win in the second, both played at the Stade de Marrakech in Morocco. The 8th edition of the tournament, organised by the Confederation of African Football, featuring national team consisting of players currently plying their trade in respective local leagues, will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda as well as Tanzania. So according to McCarthy, what he saw in those 2 matches gives him great hope that Kenya will be raring to go and ready for the Chan tournament.
Yeah, I'm preparing for Chan, but I'm also wanting to see the players that I have. This international break is finished, the players go back, and then I've got 3 a month that I can use to see all the local players, but I'm not going to have the opportunity to see the likes of Adam and Will and Nat. So that was my reasoning for calling these players, and I think if I would do it, I'd do it every day, all day, every day.
Further afield now, 4 people have been handed suspended jail sentences after being found guilty of committing hate crimes against Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. So the quartet were found guilty of hanging an inflatable effigy of Vinicius Jr. over a bridge near Real Madrid's training ground in January of 2023, shortly before Atletico Madrid's Copa del Rey match at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. Now, 3 of the group were sentenced to 14 months in prison, while 1 was given a 22-month sentence for distributing images of an act of the act online. However, the sentences have been suspended after all 4 signed a letter of apology to the Brazilian International Federation, Madrid, La Liga, as well as the Spanish Football Federation. The sentence also included a restraining order preventing the quartet from coming within 1 kilometer of Vinicius Jr., his home, or Real Madrid's training ground, as well as a blanket ban on attending La Liga or Spain national team matches. Proteas head coach Shukri Conrad hopes his team's stunning victory at Lord's in the World Test Championship final inspires South Africans to fall in love with the longest format of cricket again. Now, Conrad has transformed the national red ball side over the last 2 years that culminated in a glorious achievement at the home of cricket, where the Proteas broke the ICC trophy drought. Now, plenty of South African flocked to London to witness history being made against all rivals Australia in a contest that will long live in the memory, and Conrad hopes the effects are felt at home. Now, Conrad also added that 4 days at Lord's was the best cricketing experience they've ever been part of, as the match ebbed as well as flowed, and that also would not change his mind even if the result had gone differently on the day. The Proteas, of course, are set to return home tomorrow morning. And finally, 2 professional bodybuilders from the Nelson Mandela Bay region in South Africa's Eastern Cape province are aiming to make their mark against the best bodybuilders in the world. So the plan is on conquering Africa at the International Bodybuilding as well as Fitness Federation All Africa Cup in Johannesburg later on this year. Mongezi Matam as well as Max Kulati are fitness fanatics who have already tasted bodybuilding success. They say they've worked hard to get where they are at this very moment.
So far, I'm very happy with the progress. And for myself, I've grown individually. I've grown in the sport, so I've learned a lot and I've enjoyed a lot during those times.
I'm feeling quite excited and I'm feeling more ready because as we work, we were down, but eventually the body has come on board. Even the preparations are going good as we were hoping for.
And that's a wrap of your morning sports news, at least for this hour on Africa Rise and Shine. More sporting updates coming up in the second hour of the show. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Let's take a moment to thank the team, actually, as we head to Head Bush. I know she's on standby. Let's say thanks to our production team. That's Hlengi Wemabaso, Joey Likhodi, and Pumuzo Ramagadza. On technical production is Titimalo Makao this week. On news is Onele Nzinzi. On sports is Musibudi Makura. Social media is being handled by Talent Butelezi. And then, of course, economics news coming up now with Buntle Headbush. That's the team that makes Rise and Shine happen. Good morning, Buntle.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
A very good morning to our listeners. Now for our first look at the business news this morning. In our top story, Botswana's Debswana Diamond Company says it's looking to international markets to help fund its $6 billion Zwaneng underground project, as dwindling revenues have limited its ability to finance capital projects. The company is pressing ahead with its plan to prolong the lifespan of its flagship Zwaneng mine to 2054. Despite the downturn in the global diamond market since 2023, the plan is to prolong the mine's lifespan by converting it into an underground operation. South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile says that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will have the final say on the budget for the upcoming national dialogue. Mashatile was speaking to the media at the Northwest University Rag Farm Stadium yesterday after delivering the Youth Day celebrations message. His comments come as the National Dialogue Preparatory Committee has come under fire for the projected $43 million estimated cost for the dialogue.
The issue of the cost obviously will be looked upon by the Minister of Finance. And normally when there are activities like this, officials will start planning, will project the cost of accommodation, this and that. The Minister of Finance will finally decide whether funds are available in that regard, or we need to cut down. He will deal with that.
Nigeria's headline inflation rate has fallen slightly for the second straight month in May to 22.97% year-on-year from 23.71% in April. This is according to data from Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics, which showed that price pressures were helped by a relatively stable currency in May, flat energy costs, and no acceleration in food inflation. Analysts say the lower inflation numbers are still unlikely to convince the central bank's monetary policy committee to cut interest rates there when they meet next month. Israel's strike on Iran and Iran's response initially caused a shudder on global financial markets. The price of oil in particular surged, but after a weekend of missile and drone strikes between the two countries, the cost of crude has fallen back a bit. However, oil prices are $10 higher than they were a month ago, and there are renewed fears increased energy costs could make everything from petrol and food to holidays more expensive around the world, including in the UK. Dimakatso Leshoro.
Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the only seaway into the Persian Gulf, after it and Israel exchanged strikes since Friday last week. The Hormuz oil artery links the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It accounts for 20% of the global oil consumption. If the Islamic Republic of Iran follows through with its threat, there are concerns that this may spread the war to other parts of the region and may result in the oil price surging beyond the Friday shock that drove the price of Brent crude oil from $68 a barrel to $74.
Meanwhile, leaders at the disrupted G7 summit in Canada have discussed trade and the conflict in Ukraine, as well as the Israel-Iran crisis. There have been attempts to dissuade President Trump from introducing additional tariffs next month. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer finalized and signed the limited trade agreement reached between Washington and London last month to lower some tariffs on imports from Britain. Speaking to reporters alongside Trump, Starmer welcomed the deal.
This now implements on car tariffs and aerospace, our really important agreement. And so this is a very good day for both of our countries, a real sign of strength. So thank you again, Donald. A really important day for both of us.
Now let's take a look at the indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,544 naira 28. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. And in Zambia, it's 24 kwacha 17. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 52. Russia, 78 rubles 69. India, it's 86 rupees 02. China, 7 yuan 18. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 83 cents. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,387 and platinum at $1,236 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $73.58 a barrel. And that's our first look at the business news this morning. I'll be back with more in the next hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
6:45 Central African Time. Let's get our G20 fact for this Tuesday. It's the 17th of June. Did you know that the G20 South Africa Summit will be the 20th meeting of the Group of 20, or G20, a meeting of heads of state and government? It will be the first G20 summit held on the African continent. There are high expectations that South Africa will lead a progressive, people-centered presidency in a fractured global geopolitical context until it hands over the presidency to the United States on 1st December 2025. And that's our G20 fact for this Tuesday.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
As South Africa embraces the promise of satellite internet, including high-profile platforms such as Starlink, some industry experts are urging caution. Whilst the technology is often hailed as a quick fix for bridging connectivity gaps, critics warn that it may actually entrench inequality, especially in rural communities that lack the basic infrastructure to benefit from such services. Now, one of these sounding the alarm is telecoms infrastructure specialist Sean Shibalana. He believes that an over-reliance on satellite solutions could distract from more grounded, sustainable investments in local telecoms infrastructure like community-owned towers and mobile network expansions. He joins us now to unpack why he believes that satellite internet in its current form is not the silver bullet that it's often made out to be. Sean, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning to you and good morning to all the listeners out there.
So let's start with the big picture. Why do you think that there's a risk in the way that South Africa is embracing satellite internet?
Peter, it's topical at the moment because we know of how our president went to visit the president of the United States, and then in that meeting, the issue of Starlink was brought up, and I think it's just gained momentum. I think firstly we need to understand how the technology works for everyone out there. So to use a service like Starlink, you need to have a ground station on your property. So you need to have access to power and you need to have access to the hardware. The hardware typically sells for around, if you look at a country like Eswatini where it's licensed, there you're going to pay 6,800 Rand just for the hardware, and you have a subscription fee of about 1,200 Rand a month. So, and if you look at our situation in rural South Africa, that's not even achievable for most households. And also the practicality of trying to use it like a cell phone, where you don't have this high connectivity cost, where, nowadays I think one of the major mobile networks is even selling a smartphone for as cheap as 400 Rand. So people, that is accessible in my view. So Starlink is not something that, or from a cost point of view, that compares. And also the nature of satellite technology will not replace terrestrial towers anytime soon, because it cannot give the same bandwidth and it cannot give the same connectivity. How are people meant to make calls, even if they're connected to the network via Starlink with their devices, their phones? So it's not possible to replace it as a one-for-one replacement. So I think that's where the model falls down immediately in my mind.
So, could it be something that's deployed alongside the more traditional infrastructure? In other words, it shouldn't replace, but rather something that people can use as an option, those that can afford it.
Correct, Peter. There's a place in the digital economy in terms of that, where it can sit. So it being positioned as a replacement, I think, is incorrect. It's something that can enhance. So look at use cases. So in the leisure industry, so people who have far-flung remote lodges that also increase our tourism rands, that has a place for it. So where we cannot get terrestrial towers and coverage, that is a good thing. For emergency responders, we've looked at the natural disasters we've suffered in the Eastern Cape. There, I imagine some of the terrestrial towers have been impacted because of power lines, and some of them towers may themselves have been impacted by the floods. So there, emergency response workers who need connectivity, it makes sense to have them on their mobile, on their cars, etc. So it definitely has a place for it, but to replace it, no.
Okay, so Starlink is an independent service provider. Might it make sense? Is it something that government could take up on its own to make sure that people then have access to satellite internet if it sets up the infrastructure itself?
Like any service provider in the country, they have to conform with the laws of the country. So they have to pay their way, and they also have to comply with the rules of the country. And it's very important, because the door cannot just be opened on a special basis for Starlink, no matter what the scenario is in terms of geopolitics. So it should also pay its way and also comply with the country's rules. And I know one of them is BBBEE, where Elon Musk himself has been quoted saying these laws are not good, but he doesn't understand what it's trying to achieve. I myself am a beneficiary of BBBEE playing in this infrastructure space. Had it not been for BBBEE, we would not have an opportunity to participate in it as a small black player. So it's very important that, whatever we're going to do in the business world, that it also complies, with the rules that are set up. And I think it's very important, because it sets the level playing field for everybody.
So you've spoken about ground-up models. What kind of alternative infrastructure do you believe can better serve South Africa's most disconnected areas?
For me, being a player in the tower space, I would say more towers. I've spoken before on public platforms that one of the big inhibitors of getting more terrestrial towers out there is the red tape that we face because of the different regulations that we go through. So if government could make it more efficient to be able to put up more towers, then we would see the rollout of towers happening quicker, and we'd be able to cover the country better, because there's a lot of red tape at the moment. And so if government then worked on speeding up the red tape and cutting through the red tape, we get more towers, and then therefore more people would have access to the network.
So how would it work though? Do you pay the network operators, subsidize them to set up those towers?
No. Being an independent player, we work in conjunction with the mobile network operators, they would approach a company like ourselves who are in the space via maybe it's official tender process, or we being a supplier already existing on their books. They would, come to us and say, they have requirements to cover certain areas of the country. Would we be able to assist them with that? So we would invest our own capital into that tower infrastructure. That tower belongs to us, and then the mobile network operator would rent space on that tower.
From a policy perspective, what kind of frameworks or support would you like to see from government to encourage more sustainable infrastructure rollout?
Oh, that's a long question, and the answer is not that simple. But let me put it this way: so the various different government departments that we have to formally, license our towers with. So for us, it's the lack of coordination between these departments, and also the time that it takes that to do this, because this is a key infrastructure, and the way it's being done now, each of these government departments are working in silos, and it's taking almost up to 2 years. I mean, some parts of the country have been waiting 5 years to get all the permits. So there seems to be no urgency on their side. So in some opportunities, the mobile network operator simply walks away after a year because, you cannot tell them when exactly you're going to have that tower ready. And then also from a power infrastructure, we battle with Eskom on a weekly basis, even for existing tower sites, to get the adequate power we require. So it's really, we feel like, we are really fighting to get a fair chance in getting up this infrastructure because of the different government departments have to go through, and then to apply for a power connection. And you can imagine, Peter, in remote areas, the grid sometimes stops a kilometer away from where you need that tower. And to get that power connection to your tower can sometimes run into millions of rands. That means that for that site, the power connection becomes unaffordable. So then that also further complicates the issue of getting connectivity to some of these far-flung areas.
Listening to you talk, what it suggests is that millions of South Africans are actually denied a basic human right now, which is access to the internet.
Correct, Peter. And we're passionate about our country, and we really, really want people in the rural areas to have the same user experience as people in urban areas. And we understand that the folks could be, sparsely populated, but the tower can get to most of them, not 100% coverage, but we can get close to that. But the issue, as I mentioned before, the challenges are, firstly for us, is the red tape around. And the rules are important. I'm by no means advocating that we should take away the licensing conditions. I'm just saying we should do it better. And we should see, especially at local government level, where there's not enough staff to process some of our applications and all the other challenges. So as local government service levels degenerate, so we see that it just holds up economic activity. And may I remind you that these towers also create economic activity in the areas where the tower is. So where we place our towers, we don't own the ground underneath the towers. We rent from the property owner or the local community. And we work, in our case, we work very closely with them when we come to develop that tower, and even maintaining that tower and safeguarding its security. We are engaging very heavily with local communities, and we're working very well with local communities, even better so than, I would say, in urban areas, because local communities understand the importance of that infrastructure and how it's actually, they see it in most cases as their tower, because it's their way of connecting with the rest of the world.
What are the authorities saying to you? You must have raised all of these issues and saying, listen, we've got solutions, but you're getting in the way. What are they saying?
It depends on which authorities we are. Right now, we are, as an industry, engaging with the Civil Aviation Authority on some of the issues that are also causing holdups. We're trying to work with them as an industry grouping at various levels. Also trying to engage with that ministerial level to say, listen, look at this, it's impacting the entire industry, and also getting in the way of us trying to roll out. At local government level, you're dealing with municipalities, so who listens to you there? Because it's, in some cases, it's just very disjointed. trying to even personally go to some of these smaller municipalities is a day wasted, because the people are not there. It's very, very difficult to get some sort of cooperation from them. So we struggle, Peter. So we battle away every day, every week. We are constantly battling and trying to find ways where we can try and get answers and try and get some sort of handle on timelines, because it's all about planning. ESCOM as well, a national, head office at the regional level. We just keep away. We don't take no for an answer. So we keep doggedly chipping away at it.
You know what? I'm going to take up this story because we can't have millions of people getting left behind. So I'm going to chat with you a little bit more and try and get hold of the right people and put them on the spot right here on this program. But Sean, thanks so much indeed for joining us and highlighting this issue. And let's hope the authorities will respond as we put pressure on them. But thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That's Sean Shipalana, a leading commentator on telecoms infrastructure development in South Africa, speaking to us about these developments that are being mooted, like Starlink, which really only serves those that have, and those that have not, well, they get left further behind. It's 7 o'clock Central African time. Asanda, Beda.
A very good morning to you if you've just joined us. You still have another 2 hours with us on Rise and Shine. Thanks for staying with Channel Africa. Lots to come up in this next hour. We look at Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who signed a controversial new law allowing military courts to try civilians, despite a recent Supreme Court ruling declaring the practice unconstitutional. How we'll make that make sense? We'll have analysis talking to lawyer and political analyst Jean-Baptiste Kasominari on that one. We also look at a food crisis that's looming in South Africa, the country having said to have suffered some losses in agriculture, and by the year 2050 rather, the predictions are that we'll have up to 50% slashing in our production of food. So all that and more coming up in this hour.
But first, here's your news with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has signed legislation that allows military tribunals to try civilians. This is a move opposition leaders say violates a Supreme Court ruling. Rights campaigners have long alleged that the government had used military courts to persecute political opponents of Museveni, who has been in power for almost 40 years. His aides have denied this, saying only civilians who use guns for political violence are prosecuted in such tribunals. In a ruling earlier this year, the East African country's Supreme Court banned the practice, calling it unconstitutional. It appears that the family of the former late Zambian President Edgar Lungu and the current administration led by President Hakainde Hichilema have reached an agreement about his funeral. Lungu passed away in a South African healthcare facility earlier this month. His remains will be repatriated to Lusaka tomorrow. The days of mourning in Zambia have also been extended to the 23rd of June. Kailihle Kumalo reports.
Lungu's family and the Zambian government have been at loggerheads since former President Edgar Lungu died. Now they've reached an agreement that the sixth Zambian president will be repatriated on Wednesday. Zambian Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Department led the talks with the Lungu's family to iron out their differences. His remains will be transported from South Africa to Zambia. On Thursday, Friday and Saturday, members of the public will be allowed to pay their last respects at Mulungushi Conference Center. A state funeral will be held at the same venue on Sunday.
The first cohort of the South African National Defence Force members to arrive back in the country from the Democratic Republic of Congo have completed the demobilization program. Members have left to be reintegrated to their units, and thereafter they will be reunited with their families. Their return follows a ceasefire agreement reached between the M23 rebels and the DRC military. Major General Godfrey Tulare has confirmed that the third group of members that landed at Bramfisher International Airport are expected to begin with their demobilization program at Tempe Military Base in Bloemfontein. The fourth group will arrive today. The phased withdrawal is expected to be completed by the 25th of June. General Tulare says the demobilization process is critical.
The first day is a psychosocial program where they are going to be interviewed by the chaplains as well as the social workers and other staff from the medical environment. The second day of the demo process, it is mainly we do a personnel, and then we also do some intelligence debriefing. And then thereafter, on the third day, they are going to be leaving. So it's a very short program, but with a very, very detailed in terms of the outcome of them.
The death toll in South Africa's floods that ravaged the Eastern Cape province has now risen to 90. The provincial government says of the deceased, 60 are adults and the others are children. 80 bodies have been identified, of which 77 have been released to their families. Lastly, Iranian state media reported fresh explosions in Tehran in the early hours of this morning. This follows a warning from Israel for residents of the northeastern part of the city to evacuate. Earlier, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the military campaign against Iran was changing the Middle East and that Iranians were now seeing that the regime was weaker than they had thought. The Israeli military issued 2 warnings of an Iranian attack, but these were soon lifted. Now, for any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Esperance de Tunis get their FIFA Club World Cup campaign underway with a defeat to Brazilian side Flamengo earlier on this morning, while Banyana forward Jermaine Sipeswen announces her retirement from international football. Details of these and other stories coming up at 7:30.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Expectations are high in Canada as world leaders are meeting to discuss critical global issues. The group of 7 countries, commonly known as the G7, that's Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, France, Germany, Italy and Japan, have gathered in the mountain resorts of Kanaskis. Some of the guests include South Africa, Ukraine, Mexico, India, Brazil and South Korea. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney says that they want to strengthen peace and security, critical minerals, supply chains and job creation. Bonolo Maribe has more.
A number of world leaders have landed in Canada to attend the G7 in the Canadian Rockies. There's plenty on the agenda with the escalation of conflict between Israel and Iran and US tariffs and its effects on global economy. US President Donald Trump is also attending the session. South Africa is represented by President Cyril Ramaphosa, and on the margins of the summit held bilateral engagement with Canadian Prime Minister Mike Carney. Ramaphosa told Carney that Pretoria is pleased to have bilateral relations with Canada.
Thank you for the continued wonderful bilateral relations between Canada and South Africa. We've had a long relationship, and we're very proud of the way that we deal with each other. We support you with fires, you support us with investments, and you've supported our just energy transition, and we're really delighted. So our relations are strong, and we're particularly pleased to be here.
Carney says they will always appreciate South Africa's leadership, especially in the fractured global environment.
We've met a bit in the past, and I've been a long admirer of your leadership of South Africa, and now your leadership of the G20. And the world is very much in your hands at a crucial time. And if I may say, from a Canadian perspective, the strength of the ties between our country are great, including down to the level of assistance in natural disasters.
Global attention has turned to the Middle East, where strikes by Israel on Iran have raised the risks of an escalation into a broader regional conflict. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says that a diplomatic solution is of importance.
I reiterated Europe's commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. In this context, Israel has the right to defend itself. Iran is the principal source of regional instability, and we've always been very clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We have voiced our strong concerns over Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. A diplomatic solution remains the best way in the long run.
Diplomats say Canada has ditched the idea of a traditional comprehensive joint communique and would issue chair summaries instead, in the hope of containing a diplomatic fallout and maintaining engagement with the US. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has signed a controversial new law allowing military courts to try civilians, despite a recent Supreme Court ruling declaring the practice unconstitutional. The move has triggered criticism from opposition leaders and rights groups who see it as a tool for political repression ahead of the 2026 elections. To unpack the political and legal implications of this development, we're joined by lawyer and political analyst Jean-Baptiste Gasso-Minari. Jean-Baptiste, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Tuesday?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for making time to chat to us. What's your initial reaction to President Yoweri Museveni's signing of this legislation, given that previously the Supreme Court has had its own ruling over it?
I think it's a mixed feeling because firstly, Uganda is a sovereign country, so I think the president has the right to sign a bill into law allowing the civilians to be tried before military courts. This is a fact. He has that right. As you have introduced, saying that it's a controversial, well, it becomes controversial because many people or all the sides in Uganda are not, they are not agreeable to this bill being signed into law by the president. But the fact is, the bill has been signed, so this is a fact, and I think President Museveni did it after consulting his advisors in the matter. But when you go, I said mixed feelings because when you go back now to the practice and what the lawyers and legal scholars say, normally anybody that commits an offense is entitled to be tried by his natural judge. And for a civilian who has committed a crime, a military judge is not his natural judge. So this is where the whole thing becomes controversial, because the aim is to prosecute and acquit or sentence anyone who is accused of committing an offense, who contravenes the law. So if the natural judge of civilians is a civilian judge, then there is no point of sending this person to a military tribunal or a court martial when this person can be tried by his natural judge who is available in that country. So legally speaking, I think it shouldn't have been an issue, because judges and courts are there to try anyone who contravenes the law according to what the law prescribes. So for me, I think it's a non-issue because normally legal scholars advise that people appear before their natural judges because they want those people to have justice and to have fair justice. You can imagine, in criminal law, when someone is being prosecuted, he is being prosecuted, actually he is one person, one individual or a group individual against the state. A state which has a very big machinery and supposedly that is stronger and good position. And when this person is deprived of defense mechanism, it's like now that the justice is not dispensed to that person or to that group of persons. So I think on one hand, President Museveni, as the president of Uganda, has the right to sign into law any a bill that is presented to him if he deems it fit and necessary and fair.
So it is his right, he's
hand,
deemed it fit. His government has argued that the law is aimed at civilians who engage in armed political violence. Also in support of this bill is the army spokesperson who has hailed it as a deterrent to the formation of militant political groups. How big of a problem are these in Uganda, the formation of militant political groups? And what are the broader implications of allowing military tribunals to try civilians?
Well, as I said earlier, legally speaking, I think there is no point in it because, any person contravening the law is entitled to be tried before court of law, and courts of law in Uganda are available that could try those people, irrespective of the nature of the offense or the crimes they have committed. So for me, there was no need to send those people before military tribunals when they can be tried by their natural judges who are available and competent for that, to that effect.
So what will it mean for the credibility then and authority of the judiciary in Uganda, this new bill?
I think the bill dilutes a bit the role of the judiciary because, military judges, I'm not sure if they are as trained as civil judges, career judges who are available in Uganda at all levels, I believe. So, but on the other hand, I said President Museveni has advisors, he has all the necessary to take any decision that he has taken. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert to Ugandan matters. So that is why I'm saying that, on one hand, people who commit the offenses should be tried by their natural judges. That one is a legal fact that cannot be changed. I believe I share this view with so many other lawyers across the region.
So let's talk about those who are against it. Opposition leaders have warned that this law could be used to target figures like Bobi Wine, who is the official opposition in Uganda. Is this a legitimate concern?
It might be legitimate, but it's not all offenses that will be tried by the military tribunals or the court martial, as they call it in Uganda. So if he is caught committing the offenses that are listed in this law, in this new law, definitely he would be tried by the military courts, like the other opposition leader, Mr. Besigye, who is now being tried. Well, for him, he is maybe a former military officer, but I think now his status is a civilian. Normally, he should have also appeared before civilian courts, but he is being tried by military courts. And the other danger is that militaries follow orders. Whether you are a judge or any other serving military officer, you got orders from your superiors, and you cannot fail to execute those orders. This is why actually dispensing justice to civilians should not be given to military. I think it's not a good move.
Let's rewind a bit. In the case of Bobi Wine, he was previously charged in a military tribunal over illegal possession of guns, charges which were found to have no holding as they were later dropped. Is this not an example of how this bill could be problematic?
Going to that example, I think it's even good if a military court before found that the charges were baseless and were dropped, then I think it adds even credibility to those military courts if they can arrive at that level of dismissing charges. Then that's okay. It means that they are not receiving orders from their superiors.
All right, so Uganda can't intervene against this bill's passage again. As you say, it's the president's right to go for it.
Yeah, I think if it's the president's right that he has exercised, and if these judges can be independent and not receive any orders from their superiors to dispense justice the way they want this justice to be dispensed, then I think any judge can try any offense, and if all can be independent, that's all we want, and that's all we encourage.
All right, let's leave it there for today. Thanks again for your time, Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Political analyst and lawyer Jean-Baptiste Gasominari discussing that bill that's been passed there in Uganda by the President Yoweri Museveni. Some are calling it controversial. Others are saying it will help in making sure that there is a deterrent to the formation of militant political groups.
Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Now, as global temperatures rise and weather patterns grow more erratic, South Africa's agricultural future is under serious threat. Experts now warn that climate change could wipe out up to half of the country's food production by 2050. And that's a dire prospect for a nation already grappling with hunger, high food prices, and rural poverty. Now, while much of the focus has been on technology and infrastructure, less attention has been paid to the human element, specifically the leadership needed to drive adoptive, sustainable farming. And what kind of mindsets and skills will farmers and agricultural businesses need to survive the climate shocks that lie ahead? To help us explore these complex challenges and what leadership could look like in a food insecure future, we're now joined by Dr. Nikki Todt-Blanche, who's Head of Leadership Coaching at Stellenbosch Business School in the Western Cape. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning, Peter. Yes, thank you for the invitation.
So how is climate change already impacting food production and security in South Africa today?
Climate change, so my field of expertise is in leadership coaching. So I can't give you a perspective on that, but what I can tell you about is how we can coach leaders to become better leaders in general.
All right, so talk to us a little bit about that then. What are they seeing, and what adjustments need to be made?
Well, I think generally there's a lot of focus on leadership in general, about hard skills and the bottom line, which can also apply to this scenario that you are sketching. But I think what often is neglected are the softer skills, levels of emotional intelligence and general empathy that people have. And I think this is where something like leadership coaching could play a significant role. And interestingly, in terms of technology, the angle that we are taking is to bring in artificial intelligence coaching to coach people en masse and basically to improve their problem-solving skills and their ability to empathize and to relate to people in a more humane way.
Give us a typical example of what you're saying.
Right. Well, often I experience in leadership coaching that people struggle with interpersonal relationships, for example. So to be able to make decisions, to be able to lead your team successfully, if you are just focused on the bottom line outcome and you don't take the people along on the journey, that could be a significant challenge. So one of the gifts that coaching, and I should maybe just mention that coaching is different to mentoring. You know, people think of a mentor as someone who's more experienced at you and can help and show you the way. But a coach is someone who partners with you to hold up a mirror, essentially. It's a form of applied psychology, basically to help you gain insights into who you are as a human being. And I often get clients in the coaching world where they're unaware of the impact that their actions and their thinking patterns have on other people. So for a good leader to motivate and provide a vision, it's imperative that they also understand what the impact of their actions and behaviors are on their followers.
Stereotypically, probably, coaching is often associated with people at higher levels of management and leadership. And yet a lot of agriculture happens on a smaller scale. Can they benefit from coaching?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you posed this question. You know, coaching, especially if you know it as executive coaching, is quite expensive. We know it's very powerful, and the science, a lot of research we've done show that it works. But it's out of reach, especially for entrepreneurs and, let's say, small-scale farmers. And this is where the artificial intelligence aspect comes in. So we've developed a chatbot, and the listeners will know a chatbot perhaps as that little window that pops up when you go to your bank or your insurance website, and it pretends to be a human and asks you questions to help you. So we've programmed that into a chatbot using ChatGPT as an engine, so generative AI. With remarkable results, actually. So it's available on WhatsApp, and people of all levels can talk to it at a very low cost, in fact. One of the research studies we're doing at the moment is in the agri-manufacturing business for blue-collar workers, for example, to help them with their motivational, their autonomy, their sense of belonging, and especially goal setting. I think all of us in life, you know, if you're able to set a realistic goal and then have an AI chatbot coach check in with you regularly, help you unblock some of the issues that you have, it could be very powerful. So in South Africa specifically, yesterday we had Youth Day. You know, we have huge unemployment. There's a tremendous opportunity to give these AI coaching chatbots to people en masse that otherwise wouldn't afford other type of self-development.
Are these AI-generated chat boxes able to supply nuanced responses for South African conditions and South African people?
It is a good question you're asking. We must remember that if you use these generative AI large language models, and if anyone has played around with ChatGPT and Gemini and similar ones, which I hope everyone has, by the way, it's incredibly powerful. There is a bit of a challenge in that the models have been trained on data from the global north, which is, you know, America and Europe. But even so, it's remarkable. For example, if you ask it to speak one of the local languages, it can switch over with remarkable accuracy.
Wow.
So because the coaching is not advice giving, it's more about asking people questions and helping them to come to their own insights. It's still quite effective even in the local context.
So I suppose what it does is opens other avenues of inquiry that you might not have thought about. It might say something like, have you thought about this?
Exactly. Or, you know, you might set a goal that you want to save X amount of money by 2 or 3 months from now. And the chatbot, it's called Coach Vici, by the way, the one that we're using, comes from the Latin Veni, Vidi Vici, which I came, I saw, I conquered. The chatbot can help you to set a realistic goal. It's surprising how many of us have unrealistic goals. And by asking you questions, you might realize it's impossible to save X amount of money in 2 months, and it will then help you say what is possible, what other options have you considered. And because it uses these large language models, I've been pleasantly surprised with the suggestion that comes up with things that I would never have thought about. So it is about that thinking partner where you get stuck in your own thought, then this AI coaching chatbot can help you come up with alternative strategies.
I'm curious about these AI tools. I mean, they are powerful, no question. Does it aggregate questions and responses that it's given to other people so that when a similar question comes through, it says, oh, okay, this question has come up 40 times, and then it puts it all together and says the best response is X, Y, Z. How does it work?
It's something similar to that. So we must remember that these large language models have been trained on billions, literally billions of pieces of text from the internet.
Right.
So when you ask it a question, it gives you an answer that's most probable given what it's seen. But it's important to note that from a data security perspective, when people talk to my chatbot, for example, Coach Vici, which uses ChatGPT as an engine, then it doesn't actually, there is an option where you tell ChatGPT not to use the data for training its model, because obviously if people share strategic secrets about their company or their farming, you don't want other people to see that. But what I can say is what is very powerful in this chatbot, for example, if you speak to it for a while, it actually analyzes what you have told it. And it comes up and tells you, well, this is what I think your strong points are, and this is the areas where you think you have a need for development. And honestly, I've been an executive coach for 15 years, and when I use my chatbot, it comes back to me telling me what my areas of improvement are, and I'm pleasantly surprised how spot on it is.
I'm fascinated. We've run out of time, but I do have to ask you this. I mean, when we talk about things like climate change, does it scan weather reports and things like that and start to give you answers based on future predictions?
It can actually do that. So we have a system where it can actually access live websites. So I'm working with a company in the UK, a startup company, especially around climate awareness. So for example, the chatbot could check what the weather pattern is for the day. It could check what the electricity price is at a specific time if it fluctuates, and then gives you a push message to say, now is maybe not a good time to use your washing machine, or put on the geyser or the boiler, as they call it there. So it's a combination of conversational ability through the large language model, but definitely also incorporating real-time data, which makes it very powerful.
Wow, that's fantastic. Was I talking to the real Nikita Blanche, or was this ChatGPT generated voice?
How would you ever know?
Dr. Nikki, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Peter. All the best.
Thank you. That's Dr. Nikita Blanche, Head of Leadership Coaching at Stellenbosch Business School. That is just fantastic news, Asanda, that you can now have a mentor or a coach on your WhatsApp instead of paying thousands and thousands of rand.
Yeah, very necessary.
Yeah,
needed.
Brilliant. Okay, it's 7:31. Here are your news headlines with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has signed legislation that allows military tribunals to try civilians. This is a move opposition leaders said violates a Supreme Court ruling. Kenya's deputy police chief has temporarily stepped down from his position. This as investigations into the death of a detained blogger in police custody are underway. And the United Nations says it's being forced to scale back its aid work dramatically amid what it calls its deepest funding cuts ever. To Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports. on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning once again from the Sports Desk. Steve Smith will miss Australia's first test against the West Indies in Barbados later on this month and could also sit out the entire three-test series with a finger injury. Captain Pat Cummins having confirmed the news on Monday. Smith, one of the mainstays of the Australian team, suffered a compound dislocation of his right little finger, fielding on the third day of the World Test Championship final against South Africa at Lord's on Friday, missing the rest of the match. He was taken to hospital for x-rays, but no surgery was required. However, he faces some time on the sidelines. Australia begin the three-test series in the Caribbean in Bridgetown over the 25th to the 29th of June and then play the other two matches in Grenada as well as Jamaica. Back home now, in a development that marks the end of an era for South African women's football, Banyana star Jermaine Sipho has announced her shock retirement from international football. The 31-year-old is currently plying her trade in Mexico for CF Monterrey Femenil after joining the club in June of 2023. On the international stage, the talented striker has been an integral part of Banyana with her ability to score as well as create goals. Sipho decision to retire comes as a surprise, especially with Banyana gearing up for the 2025 Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco next month. She was a key member of the squad that secured South Africa's historic first ever WAFCON trophy in 2022, defeating the host side Morocco in that final. The talented forward confirms she will hang up her boots after the upcoming continental tournament, citing her well-being as the primary reason for this unexpected decision. Sipho expressed her gratitude to everyone who contributed to her journey, also acknowledging that her time has come to an end. She emphasized passing the torch to the next generation, urging them to continue breaking boundaries, fighting for change and setting an example, and most importantly, bringing immense joy to the people of South Africa. Further afield now, 4 people have been handed suspended jail sentences after being found guilty of committing hate crimes against Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. Now, the quartet were found guilty for the actions over Vinicius Jr. During a time where Real Madrid was at a training ground in January of 2023, shortly just before Atletico Madrid's Copa del Rey match at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. Now, 3 of the group were sentenced to 14 months in prison, while one was given a 22-month sentence for distributing images of the act online. So, however, the sentences have been suspended after all 4 signed a letter of apology to the Brazilian international, to the Madrid side, Real Madrid, La Liga, as well as the Spanish Football Federation. The sentence included a restraining order preventing the quartet from coming within 1 kilometer of Vinicius Jr., his home or Real Madrid's training ground, as well as a blanket ban on attending La Liga or Spain national team matches in the future. On to cricket news now. Marizanne Kamp, a stalwart of the Proteas women's side, is one of the longest serving members of the side and one of the greatest all-rounders in the women's cricket, and expressed her pride in her career in the career that she's built and the progress women's cricket has made since her debut back in 2009. So she earned 150th one-day international cap for South Africa over the weekend in a match against the West Indies in the second ODI. That match was won by South Africa. She's now the second player from the Proteas women's side to achieve this feat, following former captain Mignon du Preez, who concluded her career with 154 caps back in 2022.
I'm extremely proud. I think looking back, not only on my career, but where women's cricket started and when I started playing for South Africa, I didn't even know there was women's cricket, international women's cricket. When I made my debut, I just thought, I'll give this a go. Even though I've always absolutely loved cricket, I never thought women's cricket would end up here and I would still be playing, I think 15, 16 years later, and I'm still here. So it's definitely a very proud moment, and hopefully I've got a few more games in me.
Now, in a career spanning 16 years, Camp has scored 3,116 runs at an average of 33.86. She also has taken 164 wickets with her base bowling figures of being 5 for 45, which she achieved against England at the 2022 ODI World Cup. This performance also marked a maiden 5-wicket haul in one-day international cricket, also making her the 5th oldest player to achieve this feat at 32 and 69 days old.
No, I feel like I've had a few good matches. I might not always have the wickets to show for it, but yeah, I think there's definitely been a few matches. I think my first ever, the second ODI World Cup I played in India. I had a few good performances there, which I really enjoyed. My last 100 in India, in a high-scoring match. So look. It's always a proud moment when I play for my country, so I can't single out one specific performance.
Right, so that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Zochitika ndi madaphiri kamlondola wa zochitika pena paliponse.
Nduna wazamalonda ku Malawi aletsa kampani yopanga shuga ya Ilovo yomwe ndi nthambi ya Ilovo Sugar Group Limited kuti isiye kutumiza shuga kumaiko akunja. Malingana ndi nduna ya zamalonda Vitumbuko Mumba, izi zithandiza kuti shuga yemwe yakusowa pamsika azipezeka. Ndiye pano ndili ndi George Muhangu amene ali mu mzinda wa Blantyre mu dziko la Malawi. Chimene chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndi chani?
Chomwe chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndichonena kuti panopo ili ngati off season ya makampani a Ilovo Sugar Malawi, kunena kuti sakutha kupanga shugayi okwanira chifukwa akukolola. Ndiye akamaliza kukolola pameneno atayambeno sopano kugaya shugayi kuti azipezeka. Chinanso ndichonena kuti ma distributors amene akumakagula shuga kaya ndi ku Ilovo kaya ndi kusalima shuga akumagulisa ku maiko akunja ngati Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique.
Ndi madaphiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Let's check in with the world of business. Now here's Buntle Headbush with our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning. In our top business story at this hour, running battles continue between government troops and civilians asking for an immediate departure of gold, iron ore and diamond miners, especially Chinese, along Cameroon's eastern border with the Central African Republic. Civilians accuse miners of destroying the environment and taking away their resources, while communities remain poor and underdeveloped without basic infrastructure. Shulika Binla Sylvanus, a civil society activist and former member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Cameroon, says civilians are protesting because they live in abject poverty while big mining companies harvest and sell multiple natural resources in their localities.
This mining is uncontrolled in such a way that the sites exploited are abandoned since they are doing open air mining. And at times, most of these sites are fields and they become lakes. Then little children abandon school and go to these sites. We've had so many of them who have lost their lives because of drowning or because of the collapse. There's also the destruction of farmland, and we have school dropouts, we have unwanted deaths.
Botswana's Debswana Diamond Company says it's looking to international markets to help fund its $6 billion Zhuaneng underground project, as dwindling revenues have limited its ability to finance capital projects. The company is pressing ahead with its plan to prolong the lifespan of its flagship Zhuaneng mine to 2054, despite the downturn in the global diamond market since 2023. The plan is to prolong the mine's lifespan by converting it into an underground operation. South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile says that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will have the final say on the budget for the upcoming national dialogue. Mashatile was speaking to the media at the Northwest University Rag Farm Stadium yesterday after delivering the Youth Day celebrations. His comments come as the National Dialogue Preparatory Committee has come under fire for the projected $40 million estimated cost for the dialogue.
The issue of the cost obviously will be looked upon by the Minister of Finance. And normally when there are activities like this, officials will start planning, will project the cost of accommodation, this and that. The Minister of Finance will finally decide whether funds are available in that regard or we need to cut down. He will deal with that.
Nigeria's headline inflation rate has fallen slightly for the second straight month in May to 22.97% year-on-year from 23.71% in April. This is according to data from Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics, which showed that price pressures were helped by a relatively stable currency in May, flat energy costs and no acceleration in food inflation. Analysts say the lower inflation numbers are still unlikely to convince the central bank's monetary policy committee to cut interest rates when they meet next month. Leaders at the disrupted G7 summit in Canada have discussed trade and the conflict in Ukraine, as well as the Israel-Iran crisis. There have been attempts to dissuade President Trump from introducing additional tariffs next month. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer finalized and signed the limited trade agreement reached between Washington and London last month to lower some tariffs on imports from Britain. Speaking to reporters alongside Trump, Starmer welcomed the deal.
This now implements on car tariffs and aerospace, our really important agreement. And so this is a very good day for both of our countries, a real sign of strength. So thank you again, Donald. A really important day for both of us.
Now turning to the indicators, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,544 naira 28. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39, and in Zambia, 24 kwacha 17. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 52, Russia 78 rubles 69, in India it's 86 rupees 2, China 7 yuan 18, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 83 cents. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at the commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,387 and platinum at $1,236 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $73.58 a barrel. Those are your business news at this hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Global oil markets were jolted on Friday after fresh hostilities broke out between Israel and Iran, pushing oil prices sharply higher. Now, the ripple effects are already being felt in the currency markets, including pressure on South Africa's rand. And with fuel being a key driver of headline inflation, several African economies could soon face higher petrol prices and inflationary spikes. Channel Africa's Dimakatso Lishuro picks up the story.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz the only seaway into the Persian Gulf after it and Israel exchanged strikes since Friday last week. The Hormuz oil artery links the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It accounts for 20% of the global oil consumption. If the Islamic Republic of Iran follows through with its threat, there are concerns that this may spread the war to other parts of the region and may result in the oil price surging beyond the Friday shock that drove the price of Brent crude oil from $68 a barrel to $74. Former senior economist at the United Nations based in Cameroon, Bernard Wanji, says right now the impact may be limited to the spot price of Brent crude, that is the current market price, because all contracts are hedged and entered into months in advance.
What you see now, you have seen the spot prices going up from $60 to $70 per barrel, or from $64 to $71 per barrel, depending on the grade, which is an increase of 15%. But you have to know that the spot market is only 20% of the volume that is shipped on a daily basis, because most of the sales are done on future contracts and contracts with delivery at 60 days, 90 days. So when you have a significant change in spot market, like we have seen during the past week, it will have an impact if the event will last more than 3 months.
He says Iran is unlikely to carry out its threat to close the Strait of Hormuz.
Ironically, it is an oil exporting country, so it's threatening to cut the supply lines of oil, but yet it derives its revenues from oil exportation. So I don't think that Iran has any interest in disrupting the oil market and the supply chain for a long period. Yes, it can affect production in the country that is targeted, but there is plenty of oil in several producing regions in the world, in the Gulf of Guinea, in the Gulf of Mexico, in the North Sea, and there is oversupply. There is an oversupply of 2 million barrels per day.
If sustained, the high oil price spells bad news for non-oil producing African economies, some of whom have been experiencing a respite in inflation. In South Africa, headline inflation has been moderating on the back of the lower price of Brent crude, but consumers who've just seen an increase in the fuel tax and were in line for a small cut in the petrol price at the end of June, according to figures from the Central Energy Fund, could instead see a price increase. The anticipated drop was built on a lower oil price and a rand-dollar exchange rate of 17 rand 80 to the dollar. Makwe Masilela, Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers in Johannesburg, expands.
With the levy that has just been introduced locally, that takes our petrol prices higher, and that doesn't bode well when it comes to the cost of living. And we know that if you have a high cost of living, and we know that our Reserve Bank, their mandate is to fight inflation. So if inflation seems not to be under control, it increases the bets or chances of our central bank increasing interest rates, and that's going to be a double whammy for consumers because their repayments monthly will be higher, and at the same time other expenses will go up because of inflation itself.
But oil-producing nations like Algeria and Nigeria will benefit from the surge in oil price and improve their foreign exchange inflows. If the high oil price is sustained, these countries could experience an immediate relief in fiscal pressures, providing a windfall and strengthening of local currencies against the US dollar. Wanji explains.
Most of the African countries that export oil are also highly indebted. Ironically, because oil is a commodity, you want it, but once you have it, you spend more than you can earn. So you have Algeria, which is a large oil exporting country, is running a deficit of 3% of GDP. Nigeria, the same. Angola, 4% of GDP deficit. And then fiscal deficit also. The fact that oil prices has been rising during the past few days, we provide what we call a windfall. A windfall is a sudden and unexpected increase in revenue compared to what you had budgeted before. So I hope that they will use that windfall to sustain the currency and eliminate some of the fiscal problems and pay off some debt that are in arrears.
Even with the recent increase in the price of Brent crude, it is still 10% lower than the same period last year. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakatsole Shoro in Johannesburg.
As young people look to secure their future and that of the world they live in, some will be coming together at the 10th annual Green Youth Indaba in South Africa, which aims to sensitize and empower young minds about the opportunities within the green economy and sustainable development. Tosaka Media Group COO Dumisile Leroux talks about the opportunities in the green economy.
Tosaka Media Group is really lending ourselves to the unfavorable discourse that exists when it comes to youth unemployment rate. It's 2025 and we're sitting on over 46% of our young people in our country that are unemployed, and it's really time for us to shine the spotlight on where opportunities really are, and sustainable opportunities that is. And that's exactly what we are doing through our Green Youth Network. We're allowing young people a week long of engagement and saying, come in and see what the sustainable sector has in store for you, from job opportunities to SMME development, layperson language as well, to say, if you don't know anything around the green sector, this is definitely a convening point for you to come and learn, what the sector has in store for you. We'll be talking things, water conservation and renewable energy. We've got workshops around wastepreneurship. We've got workshops around, any other part of the green sector that really speaks to empowering young people and allowing them to plug into opportunity. A beach cleanup as well, for sustainability and really showing impact on ground. We'll be really getting our hands dirty tomorrow at the Blue Lagoon Beach in Durban, making sure that we're addressing the fact that we need to look after our environment in the landscape. So a lot in store for young people that really speaks to the green sector. I think one thing that we're definitely driving in the conversation is, what do these opportunities really look like? And not only that, but getting the sector to become more attractive for a 2025 young person. I think when we talk about wastepreneurship in specific, it's not really an attractive sector for young people. I mean, in essence, you're known as the gobby guy, right? And there's no heels, there's no, formal dress and suit when you're going to work, but there's a specific gear that is put on for that line of work. So it's, again, us getting to get young people to understand where the attractiveness lies in the sector, us getting young people to understand that gone are the days where we only follow our passion. We need to drive our passion through parts of the sectors that allow us to fit and plug into a gap. And where the gap really lies right now is within the green economy, and that's exactly where young people need to be plugging in. Again, there's climate change there's wastepreneurship, there's renewable energy, there's water conservation. There's so many plug-in points for young people. And what we are doing for the duration of the week, starting from tomorrow into Friday at the Durban ICC and other plug-in points for workshops, is we're unpacking these sectors and the opportunities that they've got for our young people. We've got a very strong, sustainable component of the Green Youth Network that runs throughout the year. This is a national platform because we activate throughout all 9 provinces, looking for green innovators who are really making great strides within, their green businesses. And what we are doing is we're running a competition called the Green Champion Awards that will be, recognizing young people who are doing well, specifically on Friday at gala dinner, gala dinner that is, and young people that are performing in the sector will be recognized, from SMME Trailblazers to Young Innovator Award. Again, there's many other streams that we'll be looking at, including Young Researchers Pitch, where young people are writing papers and submitting papers around the green sector and what the future looks like and how young people can adapt. Again, when it comes to job creation and addressing the unemployment rates. So there are a lot of plug-in points that are allowing young people to be showcased, both, yes, at the platform in Durban, but on a national scale as we run this, platform throughout the year through the Green Youth Network.
And that was Tosaka Media Group COO Dumisile Leroux.
So, today in history, I'm going to take you back to 1994, and I know for sure this is something that you may have watched because everybody was watching this. Guess what happened on this day in 1994? O.J. Simpson, the police followed him and it was the slowest car chase you've ever seen in your life. And they literally followed him until he ran out of petrol. And it became a major television event once it started. It was such a strange thing. And this all happened in Los Angeles in 1994, watched live by millions ushering an era of rolling news coverage. And this is what happened back in the day. But also here in South Africa, the country took the first major step towards ending apartheid by repealing something that was known as the Population Registration Act. And that was the law that classified citizens by race. And race meant classification, actually. I wouldn't even call it race. So you were either known as black, colored, white, Indian, etc. And with that classification came certain rights and an ability to live in certain areas. So this was repealed in 1991. So that was 3 years before democracy. And that was the beginning of the process of dismantling apartheid and ushering in a new era for South Africa. And in 2006, the African Union adopted something called the Youth Charter in the Gambia, committing to the empowerment and the rights of young people across the continent. And some of you may have heard about something called the Watergate scandal. Well, the Watergate scandal began with the arrest of 5 people breaking into the Democratic Party's offices in Washington, D.C., and the scandal ultimately brought down an entire president, Richard Nixon, at the time. And his deputy, Gerald Ford, took over and immediately pardoned Richard Nixon. So what it was is that it was during the presidential campaign, I think, and they bugged the offices of the opposition. And 2 journalists working for New York Times at the time uncovered this. And it just became the biggest scandal ever. Can you imagine that as a scandal in Africa?
Imagine, yeah.
Probably not, not register.
And also, if it's your birthday on this, it's the 17th of June, you share your birthday with some few famous people. Barry Manilow was born this year. This day in 1943, that American pop singer and piano player. Also, Venus Williams, born in 1980 on this day, American tennis star, considered one of the all-time greats of women's tennis, born in Linwood, California. And on our continent, Mohammed El Baradei, Egyptian Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, also recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize back in 2005. He was born in 1942 in Cairo on this day. Happy birthday to you, and that is your... those are your people that you share your birthday with, the famous ones. It's 8 o'clock then. Let's enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you've just joined us, I'm Asanda Beda.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Asanda. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has signed a controversial new law that allows military courts to try civilians. This is despite a recent Supreme Court ruling declaring the practice unconstitutional. The move has triggered criticism from opposition leaders and rights groups who see it as a tool for political repression ahead of the 2026 elections. Lawyer and political analyst Jean-Baptiste Kasominari explains.
Firstly, Uganda is a sovereign country, so I think the president has the right to sign a bill into law allowing the civilians to be tried before military courts. This is a fact. He has that right. Well, it becomes controversial because all the sides in Uganda, they are not agreeable to this bill being signed into law by the president. President Museveni did it after consulting his advisors in the matter.
Kenya's Deputy Police Chief Eliad Galat has temporarily stepped down from his position as investigations into the death of a detained blogger in police custody have gotten underway. 2 senior police officers and a closed-circuit television technician who had been called to dismantle the CCTV at the police station have also been arrested in connection with the investigation. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the capital, Nairobi, last week over the death of Albert Tujwang, a 31-year-old school teacher and blogger who had reportedly criticized the police. It appears that the family of the former late Zambian President Edgar Lungu and the current administration led by President Hakainde Hichilema have reached an agreement about his funeral. Lungu passed away in a South African healthcare facility earlier this month. His remains will be repatriated to Lusaka tomorrow. The days of mourning in Zambia have also been extended to the 23rd of June. Kailihle Kumalo reports.
Lungu's family and the Zambian government have been at loggerheads since former President Edgar Lungu died. Now they've reached an agreement that the sixth Zambian president will be repatriated on Wednesday. Zambian Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Department led the talks with the Lungu's family to iron out their differences. His remains will be transported from South Africa to Zambia. On Thursday, Friday and Saturday, members of the public will be allowed to pay their last respects at Mulungushi Conference Center. A state funeral will be held at the same venue on Sunday.
The first cohort of the South African National Defence Force members to arrive back in the country from the Democratic Republic of Congo has completed the demobilization program. Members have left to be reintegrated to their units, and thereafter they will be reunited with their families. Their return follows a ceasefire agreement reached between the M23 rebels and the DRC military. Major General Godfrey Tulari has confirmed that the third group of members that landed at Bramfisher International Airport are expected to begin with the demobilization program at Tempe Military Base in Bloemfontein. The fourth group will arrive today. The phased withdrawal is expected to be completed by the 25th of June. General Tulari says the demobilization process is critical.
The first day is a psychosocial program where they are going to be interviewed by the chaplains as well as the social workers and other staff from the medical environment. The second day of the demo process, it is mainly we do a personnel, and then we also do some intelligence debriefing. And then thereafter, on the third day, they are going to be leaving. So it's a very short program, but with a very, very detailed in terms of the outcome of them.
And lastly, the United Nations says it's being forced to scale back its aid dramatically amid what it calls its deepest funding cuts ever. It said that it had only received 13% of the requested funding, the BBC's Ensoy reports.
UN agencies had hoped to raise $44 billion in funding, but halfway through the year, it has secured just over a tenth of that. It has now been forced to do what it calls cruel math, identify what's really only about survival. They'd need $29 billion for that. The list prioritizes areas facing extreme and catastrophic conditions. Tom Fletcher, the emergency relief coordinator, says they are brutal choices that will have heartbreaking consequences.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective.
Chelsea kicked off the FIFA Club World Cup campaign against the Los Angeles FC side to tens of thousands of empty seats in Atlanta. And Steve Smith will miss Australia's first test against the West Indies in Barbados later on this month and could also sit out the entire test series after injuring his finger. Details at 8:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Cameroon government troops and civilians asking for an immediate departure of gold, iron ore and diamond miners, especially Chinese, have been in running battles along Cameroon's eastern border with the Central African Republic. Civilians accuse miners of destroying the environment and taking away their resources, while communities remain very poor and underdeveloped without basic infrastructure. Moki Kinzeka reports from Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé.
Civilians in Betari Oya village in eastern Cameroon near the border with the Central African Republic shout that all mining companies especially those owned by Chinese, should leave their locality immediately. Cameroon government officials say more than 300 Chinese miners work in the area and only about 100 have authorizations to carry out mining activities. The Central African States military says it deployed several hundred troops to stop locals who are vandalizing equipment and even beating miners. Scores of miners have fled for safety to neighboring towns, the government says. Jean-Paul Genga is a traditional ruler in Beteri Oya.
C'est un homme accueillant. Si nous sommes sur ce trône aujourd'hui, c'est grâce à notre président.
He says he is pleading with civilians to stop the destruction of property because the governments of Cameroon and President Paul Biya are already aware of the ordeals civilians in villages where gold mines are found are going through. The angry civilians say they will only stop protesting when the government gives them roads, schools, hospitals and some basic facilities that they have not had within the past 50 years that minerals were discovered in their villages. Shulika Binla Silvanos is a civil society activist and former member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Cameroon. He says civilians are protesting because they live in abject poverty while big mining companies harvest and sell multiple natural resources in their localities.
Apart from the mining, which is destroying the environment by anarchical cutting of trees to create space to dig, there's also the destruction of farmland and pushing these communities to focus on the remnants or the left outs. We have school dropouts, we have unwanted deaths, we have polluted waters and environment, we have illnesses, waterborne diseases, airborne diseases, and insecurity.
Silvanos says high waves of corruption among government officials and mining companies deprive villagers of their wealth.
Almost 80% of the gold goes out of the country uncontrolled. And this has been identified in the Arab world where they have seen gold that is from Cameroon, but this gold has not been registered by the mining corporation. These areas are lacking medical facilities, educational facilities. Children will prefer reaching mining sites that are closer to their habitats than trekking kilometers to go to schools, which at times are not having teachers.
Locals say gold exploitation also leaves polluted holes and destroys vegetation and animal habitats. But some gold miners argue that they have provided roads, generators, and safe drinking water, but the means to extend the facilities to all villages is limited. In 2014, the government cracked down on what it said was the illegal export of gold and diamonds and suspended some foreign mining contracts. Reporting for Channel Africa, this is Moki Kinzika in Yaoundé, Cameroon.
So tensions continue to rise in Kenya following the death in police custody of political blogger Albert Ojwang, whose case has sparked widespread public outrage and fresh concerns about police brutality in the country. The incident, now under investigation, has led to the arrest of 2 senior police officers and a CCTV technician allegedly involved in tampering with surveillance footage. Kenya's Deputy Inspector General of Police, Eliud Lagat, has also stepped aside, at least temporarily, as the scrutiny intensifies. Human rights groups and opposition voices have mobilized for nationwide protests. calling for accountability, police reform, and greater protection of civil liberties. So to help us unpack the latest developments and what they mean for Kenya's political landscape, we're now joined on the line by Alex Kiaru, who's a Kenyan journalist and a Pan-African political commentator. Alex, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome.
All right, talk to us a little bit about today's protest action. What's behind it, and what are the main demands of the organizers?
Yesterday, some more damning revelations emerged from the investigations by the police oversight body. And according to the report that came out, the sentry who had been arrested earlier on and given a statement recanted his earlier statement and gave a more damning one that implicated the
Alex, we're struggling to hear you. I'm wondering if you've muted.
Not really. I don't think
I've
muted.
Okay. All right. Okay, so he gave her a more damning version of the statements. What did he say?
So he said that he received a statement, or rather a call from his commanding officer, who is the head of the station, where Ojwang was allegedly being brought to, indicating that the Deputy Inspector General of Police had ordered that the inmate who will be brought in that evening of 7th of June needed to be dealt with. In other words, to be punished. So the sentry sent for some money, and it actually was delivered 2,000 shillings, which is around 275 rands, which was used to buy alcohol for the inmates who were supposed to execute that role. So the inmates, after being, of course, given the alcohol, they were taken to the cell where Ojwang was being held with the express orders of beating him up because he had allegedly offended the boss. However, according to him, the inmates could have gone overboard and actually beaten up more than it was expected, killing him while he's still in the cells. So it was at that moment that they took Ojwang to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. So when these revelations came out yesterday, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, that's Lagat, offered to step aside. And most activists have not taken this lightly. They want him to resign, actually. If you read today's newspaper, Standard, it has actually said clearly, no, just resign. That's the headline. And to push for this, they have called for protests across the country, and most of it is going to be like to shut down the nation and push for this man's resignation, because according to them, stepping aside means that he can be recalled back or be given a different role, because that is the norm. This, according to the protesters and the activists, seems to be the norm, because so many inmates and suspects have been dying in prisons rather than cells before being taken to the courts, which is not supposed to be legal. A person is supposed to be held for not more than 24 hours and be presented before a court of law. But here we have cases of suspects dying in cells, in police custody, and then later it emerges that most of them die by suicide. And another case, for example, that is coming up is of a certain British suspect who died in a prison in the coast of Kenya, and it was also labeled as suicide. So this is the reason why now protests are being organized, and they have not taken off so far. I'm just from town and I've not seen any happening, but usually such protests usually peak from around 11 a.m. East African time, which you're waiting to see how it turns out to be. Peter?
I think you may have partly answered my next question, because I mean, you've been a journalist in the country for a long time now, and you've cited some examples of so-called suicides. That a deputy police commissioner, inspector general, can say a prisoner needs to be dealt with. This means that there's been a culture of excessive force by police and issuing out their own justice at times over the years. Is this what's been playing out? And it's just for them, what's happened is that they hit the wrong person.
Actually, I think they hit the wrong person at the wrong time, because it is not the first time that such cases have been reported across the country. And usually these cases involve cases where senior police officers feel violated by people who are not supposed to have the powers to cross their ways. Remember, a few years back, there is a lawyer called Willie Kimani who was representing a motorbike operator in a place called Machakos. The motorbike operator had been arrested, and he had a genuine case, and his bike was detained. So he enlisted a lawyer who, together with the suspect and another person, actually a driver, were killed by the police officer who has since been jailed. There's another case of a police officer who also shot dead the suspect involved in robbery with violence in Nairobi, who is also facing similar charges. So it is just a culture that has been engendered by senior police officers who feel like they have the powers to execute their own forms of justice against the law, just to punish the people they feel should not be questioning their law and authority. So this is what Kenyans are now trying to push for end to, so that they can be able to ensure that everybody who is arrested is accorded the respect and the justice that they need before being proceeded rather to face the court of law, without having to be justice to be meted out by people who are not legal officers in the country.
So this particular case related to a very senior police official, but there are, I think, broader questions being asked that the police are often deployed to clamp down on opposition voices, people that speak out against the government in general, the president in general, dissenting voices, and human rights activists in particular. Is this what's playing out as well, that these protests are about the general case more than just Ojwang?
Yes, Ojwang is just a trigger. It was something that has been simmering for quite a while. Remember that the cases of abduction and disappearances of people, mostly who are seen to be critical of the government, have been sparking in the recent past, especially in the aftermath of the June 25 protests that saw Parliament breached. So this in itself has seen the government also become more outspoken and more pronounced in the way it deals with the people they view as critical of the activities, but now in an illegal and overzealous and actually over extrajudicial manner. However, activists have been calling for the law to be followed to the letter, so that these kinds of cases of killings, of abductions and disappearances are dealt with, because the Kenyan Constitution has its own forms of has stipulated its own forms of justice, without having to involve police who decide on what to do with a suspect, or what to do in the case of a violation of the law, without having to go through the courts. So it's just a whole trigger to a bigger political issue that has been raised by human rights organizations and other activists in the country, especially the young protesters that have been seen very active in the streets in the recent past.
This particular case also sounds very much like the police have been trying from the get-go to cover things up. In the first instance, they came up with the version that they had to backtrack from. And now we're hearing about CCTV technicians being among those that were arrested. So it sounds like there's been a big cover-up, or an attempt to cover up what really happened.
Yes, cover-ups are very normal in the country, especially whenever police or security agencies are involved, and also the big political players and people who are seen to be financially stable. They buy justice in the country. And in this case, it came at the wrong time, as I indicated, because it came at the time when people already angry and tired, and they wanted something different to be done. Because, as I said, so many cases, previous cases have been reported where cover-ups have happened, accidents involving civilians and innocent people killed by motorists. But these motorists always end up free without having to care about what had happened to the families of the people who have been maimed and killed. So it is just that it's an idea of reforms that has come at the right time, but it has been happening, and cover-ups are very normal in the country, especially whenever security agencies are involved and also senior political players.
President Ruto's government came under serious threat, and his own leadership came under threat with the finance bill protests that we saw. Do you think that these protests could escalate to a point where he may be concerned again about his own tenure?
Actually, Kenyans are already indicating that they are handling or rather dealing with this issue of Ojwang for now, but they are coming back to now focus on the finance bill that is now actually in parliament after the reading of the budget. So we're expecting these protests to actually scale higher. And as actually earlier expected, people were seen to be more afraid of the violent manner or the violent response by the government. But then last week's protest actually beat that back, and we now expect the protest to be more aggressive and more pronounced, because even the police seem to have heeded the call. And as we saw last week, they were not so aggressive in confronting the protesters. So this could either escalate or just escalate more.
What has been the president's response or his government's response to this scandal of Ojwang?
The president spoke about it, and actually he addressed himself to the same and said that police officers need to follow the law. But as usual, our president has always been coming out to be seen to be accommodative, but through words. However, the actions by his state usually speak the opposite. Abductions have been happening even when he condemns them. The killings of suspects and even crackdown on media has been happening even when he condemns it. And actually, during the national prayer breakfast, he apologized to young people in the country, but yet we saw Ojwang's case happening. So Kenyans don't really trust the president's word, but they normally actually react to his actions, to his government's actions rather.
Similar protests against the police in Nigeria led to the disbandment of one of their special units, and they were calling for reform. Is this something that Kenyans want also, for reform in the police service itself?
Actually, Kenyans just want a cleanup, because in the case of Nigeria, there was a crack unit that had been formed which was accused of killing innocent people. In Kenya, it is the national police that is on this in the spotlight, and this is what is making it even more concerning, because it is not a crack unit or rather unit within the police force that is in focus right now. It is the entire police force and the entire security sector. Remember that a BBC documentary had revealed that some soldiers were involved in the killing of protesters last year. So it's a whole focus on the entire security sector, which is actually making it even more and more concerning for everyone else, because the president seems to be leading a military state, contrary to the constitution of Kenya, which places the people on top of everything else, including the leaders.
This police behavior, is this widespread in terms of right across the country, or is it limited to urban centers such as Kenya?
Actually, it is worse in the rural areas, because that's where people are not informed enough to know what. Sorry, I think I received a call.
All right.
In the rural areas, people are very much informed on what to do whenever they are confronted by the police officers. It is there where people actually get more violated, because usually they rush to pay a bribe to get out of a sticky situation. So it is not just in the urban centers, it is widespread across the country. And in the country, when you are confronted by a police officer, usually they either go for a bribe or to put you in the cells. And the cells are not in such conditions, humane conditions, to allow you or any suspect to want to be there. So usually people prefer to end the case by paying a bribe and then being let free to go and do whatever they want to do. So this is the injustices, the extrajudicial approach to issues is what has now made the country to be so angry and actually more and more intent on seeing change in the whole security sector in the country.
So you mentioned a military state. Are we saying that this extrajudicial behavior is coming from State House, that it's an instruction coming from the highest office in the land?
You see, they say that when a fish rots, it starts from the head. The police officers usually toe the line, and we have seen them actually be better or good police officers when we had a president who was focused on human rights in the country. That I'm talking about President Kibaki. And whenever he gave orders for the police to behave, they behaved. So in this case, there is some aspect of lethargy, some aspect of condoning of these behaviors by State House itself. So it is clearly a whole matter that needs to be taken vertically and not horizontally.
All right. So what can we expect in the coming days?
More protests, and maybe the president taking a hardline stance, or maybe bending backwards to accommodate the protesters' demands. But it's not going to be a smooth ride for the state and for the government, and especially for the police officers, because if now the police cave in and do whatever they want, the protesters want, they will demand for more. And maybe it will go up to some point. But for now, I think more protests are expected in the coming days. Remember that the finance bill has not been handled, and then we are looking into the anniversary that is coming up in the next few days of the June 25 protests, which will clearly be marked by more protests in the country.
Alex, that's where we're going to leave it. As always, thank you so much indeed for your insightful analysis. Asante sana, kwaheri.
Asante, nashukuru pia, kwaheri.
Thank you. That's Alex Kiari, a Kenyan journalist and Pan-African political commentator, making sense of these protests. And I can't use another word except the misbehavior of the police in the country. And this death of Ojwang sounds like extrajudicial killing, ordering fellow prisoners to deal with a prisoner who ends up dead in police custody. We'll keep on top of that story for sure. It's 8:30. Here are news headlines with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. Ugandan President Ndoro Museveni has signed a controversial new law that allows military courts to try civilians. This is despite a recent Supreme Court ruling declaring the practice unconstitutional. Humanitarian aid organization The Gift of the Givers says they expect to recover more bodies from flood victims in the Eastern Cape province in South Africa in the coming days. The death toll currently stands at 90. And a new study of how people across the world access news has identified a marked shift away from traditional media towards platforms such as YouTube, TikTok and X. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now for the latest in the world of sports. Here's Musibudi Makura with our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning once again from the Sports Day. So Chelsea kicked off their FIFA Club World Cup campaign against the Los Angeles FC side to tens of thousands of empty seats in Atlanta. Now, the game started at 3 p.m. local time on a working Monday at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. The attendance for the Chelsea 2-0 win was announced as 22,137 in a ground which can hold 71,000 spectators. Though the entire top tier was closed, a small middle tier seemed to be mostly full, but a larger bottom tier was more than half empty. Now, the cheapest ticket was at about $50 immediately before kickoff, although seats were significantly more expensive in the build-up to this year's tournament. During the games, tickets were still on sale online for $35, with many available in nearly every section of that stadium. Meanwhile, Brazilian giants Flamengo set themselves up for a Club World Cup showdown with Chelsea by easing to a 2-0 victory over Esperance of Tunisia in their opening match played at the tournament also on Monday. Goals on either side of halftime gave a dominant Flamengo coached by former Chelsea player Felipe Luis a deserved victory in a Group D clash in Philadelphia. Meanwhile, South Africa's Mamelodi Sundowns will be in action in their first game at this year's tournament, so they are set to face off with a South Korean side, Ulsan HD, at midnight. That's, of course, midnight South African time. This later tonight going into tomorrow morning in their first game, of course, of the FIFA Club World Cup. Of course, this is Mamelodi Sundowns' second appearance at the global competition, having played there for the very first time back in 2016 as African champions. On to some cricket news now. Marizanne Kamp, a stalwart of Proteas women's side and one of the greatest all-rounders in the women's game, expressed her pride in a career that has built, and the progress women's cricket has made since she made her debut back in 2009. She earned her 150th one-day international cap for South Africa over the weekend in a match against the West Indies. She now is the second player from the Proteas women's side to achieve this feat, following former captain Mignon du Preez, who concluded her career with 154 caps in 2022.
I'm extremely proud. I think looking back not only on my career but where women's cricket started, and when I started playing for South Africa, I didn't even know there was women's cricket, international women's cricket. When I made my debut, I just thought, I'll give this a go. Even though I've always absolutely loved cricket, I never thought women's cricket would end up here and I would still be playing, I think 15, 16 years later, and I'm still here. So it's definitely a very proud moment, and hopefully I've got a few more games in me.
So in a career spanning 16 years, Kamp has scored 3,116 runs at an average of 33.86. She has also taken 164 wickets, with her best bowling figures being 5 for 45, which she achieved against England in the 2022 Cricket World Cup. Now, this performance also marked her maiden 5-wicket haul in ODI international cricket, also making her the 5th oldest player to accomplish this feat at 32 years and 69 days.
No, I feel like I've had a few good matches. I might not always have the wickets to show for it, but yeah, I think there's definitely been a few matches. I think my first ever, the second ODI World Cup I played in India. I had a few good performances there, which I really enjoyed. My last 100 in India, in a high-scoring match. So look, it's always a proud moment when I play for my country, so I can't single out one specific performance.
Still on cricket news, Steve Smith will miss Australia's first test against the West Indies in Barbados later on this month and could also sit out the entire 3-test series with a finger injury, with Pat Cummins, the captain of the Australian test side, having confirmed this On Monday, Smith, one of the mainstays of the Australian team, suffered a compound dislocation of his right little finger fielding on day 3 of the World Test Championship final against South Africa at Lord's on Friday, missing the rest of the match. He was taken to hospital for x-rays, but no surgery was required. However, he faces some time on the sidelines. Australia began their 3-match test series in the Caribbean in Bridgetown from the 25th until the 29th of May, and then play the other 2 test matches in Grenada as well as Jamaica. It's a wrap of your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. More sporting updates coming up in the next hour with the On The Move team. As always, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It's time to get a final business update right here on Rise and Shine. And with all the info is Buntle Headbush. Good morning, Buntle.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much, and a very good morning to our listeners this morning. A Mali court has placed Canada's Barrick Mining's Lulu Gunkoto mine in Mali under state control in a major escalation of a dispute over taxes and ownership. The presiding judge said a former Malian health minister, Souman Makaji, will take over as a provincial administrator for 6 months. The move follows actions by the Malian government to block gold exports and seize gold stocks held by Barrick's subsidiaries. Barrick says it will appeal the decision. There are reports of ongoing clashes between government forces and civilians in Cameroon, particularly along the eastern border with the Central African Republic. Civilians are demanding the immediate departure of gold, iron ore and diamond miners, with a specific focus on Chinese nationals. They accuse the miners of destroying the environment and taking away their resources, while communities remain poor and underdeveloped. Shulika Binla Sylvanus, a civil society activist and former member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Cameroon, says civilians are protesting because they live in abject poverty, while big mining companies harvest and sell multiple natural resources in their localities.
This mining is uncontrolled in such a way that the sites exploited are abandoned since they are doing open air mining. And at times, most of these sites are fields and they become lakes. Then little children abandon school and go to these sites. We've had so many of them who have lost their lives because of drowning or because of the collapse. There's also the destruction of farmland, and we have school dropouts, we have unwanted deaths.
South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile says that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will have the final say on the budget for the upcoming national dialogue. Mashatile was speaking to the media at the Northwest University Rag Farm Stadium yesterday after delivering the Youth Day celebration speech. His comments come as the National Dialogue Preparatory Committee has come under fire for the projected $43 million estimated cost for the dialogue.
The issue of the cost obviously will be looked upon by the Minister of Finance. And normally when there are activities like this, officials will start planning, will project the cost of accommodation, this and this. The Minister of Finance will finally decide whether funds are available in that regard, or we need to cut down. He will deal with that.
The European Commission is set to propose today a ban on European Union imports of Russian gas and liquefied natural gas by the end of 2027, using legal measures to ensure the plan cannot be blocked by EU members Hungary and Slovakia. The proposals will set out how the European Union plans to fix into its law its vow to end decades-old energy relations with Europe's former top gas supplier Russia, made after Moscow's 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. An internal commission summary of the upcoming proposal says it will fix into law a ban on imports of Russian pipeline gas and LNG from the 1st of January 2026, with longer deadlines for certain contracts. Israel strikes on Iran, and Iran's response initially caused a shudder on global financial markets. The price of oil in particular surged, but after missile and drone strikes between the two countries, the cost of crude has continued to rise this morning. Oil prices are $10 higher than they were a month ago, and there are renewed fears increased energy costs could make everything from petrol and food to holidays more expensive around the world, including in the UK, Dimakatso Lishoro reports.
Iran has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the only seaway into the Persian Gulf, after it and Israel exchanged strikes since Friday last week. The Hormuz oil artery links the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. It accounts for 20% of the global oil consumption. If the Islamic Republic of Iran follows through with its threat, there are concerns that this may spread the war to other parts of the region and may result in the oil price surging beyond the Friday shock that drove the price of Brent crude oil from $68 a barrel to $74.
Now take a look at our indicators this morning. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,544 naira 28. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. In Zambia, 24 kwacha 17. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 52. Russia, 78 rubles 69. In India, it's 86 rupees 2. China, 7 yuan 18. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 83 cents. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at the commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,387 per ounce, while platinum is at $1,236 per ounce. The Brent crude oil price is at $73.58 a barrel. And those are your business news at this hour. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
8:45 Central African time it is. Let's look into this story now. People with disabilities in institutions face a higher risk of trafficking due to their dependence on caregivers, a vulnerability often exploited. That's according to Eric Rosenthal of Disability Rights International, speaking at the UN, or the United Nations. He says isolation from family makes them easy targets. Trafficking cases have surged globally, with a 25% rise in detections between 2019 and 2022. UN News' Anna O'Donnell began by asking Rosenthal why people with disabilities are so vulnerable.
Well, I founded my organization 30 years ago to bring the protections of international human rights law to people with disabilities and to address the areas where the most severe and pervasive abuses take place. And what we have found is that children placed in orphanages, adults in psychiatric facilities, social care homes, group homes, wherever people are segregated from society and cut off from public view, an array of abuses can take place. Their choices are taken away from them, their legal rights are taken away from them. And so exploitation, abuse, and indeed trafficking happens, and it happens on a large scale. There is a massive undercount of children in institutions. We believe it's upwards of 10 million children around the world, and there is no count of adults. So we're talking 10, 20, 30 million adults put away, and whenever people are put away, the trafficking exists. We have documented it on our website. We've got reports from 30 countries or so where we've documented these issues. The U.S. government's Trafficking in Persons report identified institutionalization as an inherent vulnerability marker for trafficking. So the documentation has been out there and it's been recognized, and we've just got to make sure that the link is made more often between trafficking and institutionalization of children and adults.
You're working at the forefront of this issue, but trafficking is often overlooked in disability advocacy, and within anti-trafficking, disability is often overlooked. Could you explain why you think that is, why that connection isn't made as often as it should be?
Right. Well, when people are locked up, orphanages, you think, oh, orphanages are great places because kids don't have parents. They're safe there. When people are identified as mentally ill, they assume that they're there for their own safety. They're there for their protection. How could mentally ill people live in the community? And so institutionalization and orphanages, they're normalized because people think that they're there for their own benefit. And it never occurs to people that, number one, kids are only safe when they're with their families. Most kids in orphanages have families. They're there because of disability or poverty. Their parents love them and want to be with them, but can't because of the lack of support. People with a diagnosis of mental illness can live. We know all the evidence shows they can live in the community and thrive. But when they're locked up, abuse, torture, exploitation, trafficking are going to. So it's the patina of beneficence that's the problem. And that's what's so key about disability rights. It says you have a right to be part of society. You have a right to make your own choices. And breaking through this business of we're doing it to protect you, to show that actually those people are not being protected. They're being abused, exploited, and trafficked. And that's the word we're trying to get out.
What would you tell survivors in the disability community and those institutionalized as we speak about this conference and about your work and its impact?
The survivors take enormous hope in getting this recognition from the United Nations. We are so pleased that the Special Rapporteur Hagras is bringing attention to this issue, because I've worked very closely with those survivors. They are forgotten. They are overlooked. The world needs to know. And as I gave the example of Riccardo Costelecchi, who risked his life, he was continually raped, exploited in a psychiatric facility, and he risked his life to speak out. He is no longer with it. I want to honor those survivors, the people who have died speaking out to expose this. We have to support them, and in their memory and in their honor, we all have to take action to say, no, we can't allow this to continue.
16% of displaced people globally are disabled. How do disability and displacement contribute to this nexus of disability and trafficking?
Yes, we work very much on displacement. We have a big program in Ukraine where there's an enormous number of internally displaced people. On our website, a report, Left Behind in the War, about displaced children with disabilities. As the special reporter said, when there's a war, the non-disabled run. They go to safety. People with disabilities left behind. Ukraine, for example, is a country that had 100,000 children in institutions before the war. The children with disabilities get dumped into those facilities when everyone else runs. So they're even more overcrowded and in a very dangerous situation. On our website, we have examples from Guatemala, Ukraine, and Kenya. We have the documentation on infanticide in Kenya, the Federico Mora Psychiatric Facility in Guatemala, the Hogar Seguro. At the Hogar Seguro Orphanage in Guatemala, girls who were being systematically trafficked broke out, were locked up, 41 girls were burned to death for protesting their own trafficking, and we are representing them before the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. It's so important. So that case is one of the cases that we are working on. Our work in Ukraine, all the documentation, we are sitting on mounds of documentation. There are extensive documentation from dozens of countries. The problem is not documentation. The problem is the courage to take action to end the abuses.
What would you say, as someone who's been on the field, been with survivors, whether they're migrants in Ukraine or in institutions in the U.S., what solutions have you looked at and thought have been productive? What solutions do you think people should be advocating for?
Our organization specializes in not just documentation, but litigation using legal systems. And so support for litigation, it may be a long-term solution, but it really is a way of systemically addressing. Changing laws, policies are important. But there is also no substitute for tiny amounts of money going to support the advocacy, helping parents keep their kids so that they don't have to put them in institutions, peer support. On a small scale, stopping children from being separated from their parents is probably the best investment that could possibly be made. I mean, in countries in Kenya, we found out that more than 50% of children, families who have kids with disabilities, were told by their community to let their children die or to kill them because of a fear of what the stigma of having disability in the community. Infanticide is common. We can't let that happen. People with disabilities are humans. Children with disabilities are humans. And if I were speaking to donors supporting grassroots advocacy by people with disabilities, helping parents keep their children who they love rather than giving them up to an institution is the fastest way to save large numbers of lives.
That's Eric Rosenthal, who leads Disability Rights International, speaking to Anna O'Donnell of UN News. And finally, young people look to secure their future and that of the world they live in, and some will be coming together for the 10th annual Green Youth Indaba in South Africa, which aims to sensitize and empower young minds about the opportunities within the green economy and sustainable development. Tukasa Media Group COO Dumisile Leroux talks about the opportunities in the green economy.
So Saka Media Group is really lending ourselves to the unfavorable discourse that exists when it comes to youth unemployment rate. It's 2025 and we're sitting on over 46% of our young people in our country that are unemployed. And it's really time for us to shine the spotlight on where opportunities really are and sustainable opportunities that is. And that's exactly what we are doing through our Green Youth Network. We're allowing young people a week long of engagement and saying, come in and see what the sustainable sector has in store for you, from job opportunities to SMME development, layperson language as well, to say, if you don't know anything around the green sector, this is definitely a convening point for you to come and learn, what the sector has in store for you. We'll be talking things, water conservation and renewable energy. We've got workshops around wastepreneurship. We've got workshops around, any other part of the green sector that really speaks to empowering young people and allowing them to plug into opportunity. A beach cleanup as well, for sustainability and really showing impact on ground. We'll be really getting our hands dirty tomorrow at the Blue Lagoon Beach in Durban, making sure that we're addressing the fact that we need to look after our environment in the landscape. So a lot in store for young people that really speaks to the green sector. I think one thing that we're definitely driving in the conversation is, what do these opportunities really look like? And not only that, but getting the sector to become more attractive for a 2025 young person. I think when we talk about wastepreneurship in specific, it's not really an attractive sector for young people. I mean, in essence, you're known as the garbage guy, right? And there's no heels, there's no, formal dress and suit when you're going to work, but there's a specific gear that is put on for that line of work. So it's, again, us getting to get young people to understand where the attractiveness lies in the sector, us getting young people to understand that gone are the days where we only follow our passion. We need to drive our passion through parts of the sectors that allow us to fit and plug into a gap. And where the gap really lies right now is within the green economy, and that's exactly where young people need to be plugging in. Again, there's climate change there's wastepreneurship, there's renewable energy, there's water conservation. There's so many plug-in points for young people. And what we are doing for the duration of the week, starting starting from tomorrow into Friday at the Durban ICC and other plug-in points for workshops is we're unpacking these sectors and the opportunities that they've got for our young people. We've got a very strong, sustainable component of the Green Youth Network that runs throughout the year. This is a national platform because we activate throughout all 9 provinces looking for green innovators who are really making great strides within, their green businesses. And what we are doing is we're running a competition called the Green Champion Awards that will be, recognizing young people who are doing well, specifically on Friday at gala dinner, gala dinner that is, and young people that are performing in the sector will be recognized from SMME Trailblazers to Young Innovator Award. Again, there's many other streams that we'll be looking at, including Young Researchers Pitch, where young people are writing papers and submitting papers around the green sector and what the future looks like and how young people can adapt. Again, when it comes to job creation and addressing the unemployment rates. So there are a lot of plug-in points that are allowing young people to be showcased, both, yes, at the platform in Durban, but on a national scale as we run this, platform throughout the year through the Green Youth Network.
That was Tosaka Media Group COO, Dumisile Leroux, okay? After Rise and Shine comes On the Move here on Channel Africa. And to find out what's happening, Balesa is joining us to give us a throw forward. Good morning and happy Tuesday.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Doing good. Well, today on the Move in today's first hour, we'll be unpacking a recent report carried out amongst 165 young adults in Nigeria, South Africa and Zambia to establish what could be done to improve future vaccine acceptance, because it is this particular age group, young people, who seem to not really be quite very accepting of vaccines. So we found out why from Dr. Oluwaseyi Dolopo Samfan, Research Associate at the University of the Western Cape, who'll be joining us in the first hour. And then we go in the cubicle in today's second hour of the show to speak about, life in the workplace. And today we're talking about how come anxiety really gets unnoticed in the workplace. We're going to be taking a look at the impact of anxiety on workplace productivity with clinical psychologist Baba Lwadesi in today's second hour. And in the final hour, it's our Money Matters feature. This is where we speak all things personal finance. And we speak about, of course, the economy isn't doing that amazing. And young people also continue to bear the brunt of this. So we'll be taking a look at a report that shows a generation shaped by financial pressure and economic uncertainty, but full of grit. Gen Zs are actually finding ways to tackle some of the economic pressures that they're under. So we're speaking to Ronan Ayres, Chief Executive Officer at Student Village, about their recent report on this.
Okay. So there's 2 reports for the show.
Two reports today.
Busy day in terms of research. Okay, that's interesting. The one about anxiety in the workplace, I think is quite important.
Yeah, because we don't even see anxiety, right? It's not tangible.
Exactly.
You can't really see it. But you don't know with the people who are in a certain workplace who have this anxiety. But it's affecting, the workplace, their productivity. So who's actually, losing?
Question for you.
Sure.
Can you have misdiagnosed anxiety?
Probably anything can be misdiagnosed.
Well, in the sense that you're anxious, but you don't realize actually that it's anxiety.
I would say you would have self-diagnosed anxiety unless you actually go to a professional who actually diagnoses you with anxiety, because that's what people say a lot. I feel so anxious, but that's not an anxiety diagnosis. Being anxious is also a feeling that we all get, right? Yes. But that doesn't mean you suffer from anxiety. So unless you go to a medical profession who diagnoses you with anxiety, you might be self-diagnosing.
All right. Well, that's to look forward to, and stay with us on Channel Africa as On the Move comes up after the news at 9 o'clock with Onel Nsinsi. From me, Asanda, Beda, and
me, Peter Ndoro. Have an awesome day, everyone. Peace.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni signs a controversial new law